Hello there everyone, and welcome back to Canine Cannibalism. Today we are going to be taking a look at, unfortunately, The Bug Collector by Wrath James White. The book is 72 pages with a prologue and 10 chapters. It is a novella, so short. I'll give you a quick blurb. Our main character Joey has a paraphilia that is killing him. A woman that he has wronged in the past because of this paraphilia kidnaps him and systematically tortures him for revenge. It's about as simple as it gets, folks. If you're unfamiliar with my videos, I'm going to be giving you a content sample. I will be giving you a review, a plot summary, a little more review after the plot summary, and then we're out of here. This book, not bad. I want to say that right away, because you may be thinking that I'm acting like this because it's bad. It's exhausting. Exhausting. Which was the intent, so, you know, I got what I paid for, I guess. Let's get into a content sample. Lost the word there. If you were to pick up a copy of The Bug Collector, and it's a video game, YouTube, it's a video game, and read it, you would find all of the following: gore, torture, mutilation, and death. And in this book, that includes the subcategories of cannibalism and genital mutilation. There's also sexual abuse in this book, including sexual assault, rape, and kind of incest. Kind of. There's like mentions of incest, and then scenes that are kind of incest, but I guess you can make an argument not really. Doesn't really matter, considering what else is happening in those scenes. So I'm just gonna move on. There's also child abuse in this book, including physical abuse and sexual abuse. You've also got some shit, including coprophilic acts and coprophagic acts. So, fun with shit and eating shit. You've also got some urine stuff, including sexual acts with urine and the drinking of urine. There's also some vomit, nothing sexual, thankfully, just throwing up on yourself, that kind of thing. The descriptions of the smell of the vomit. Wearing things that have vomit on them. There's homophobia in this book. Like, again, I don't know. I've said this before when I reviewed Exquisite Corpse. I don't include that when, like, it's just the use of slurs. So in this book, it's like a guy blaming his son for his own sexual assault because it was a man that did it, and then subsequently essentially kicking him out of the house. And then there's some transphobia, which again, I'm not talking about slurs. There's a description of a hate crime. So there's also addiction in the book in many forms, in many different levels of detail. And then finally you have your general filth, which in this book includes cum eating. And it's been a while, so I will re-explain. When I say something like cum eating or ingestion of vaginal discharge, I'm not referring to eating someone out or swallowing from a blowjob. I'm referring to, like, this is an example from They All Die Screaming, like coming on food and then eating it, that kind of thing, or playing with it and then eating it, or describing how it's cold or has liquid in it that shouldn't be there and then eating it, that kind of thing. There's also pus, including the ingestion of pus, a lot of pus and green and yellow liquids seeping from wounds, fuck ton of that. There's the ingestion of vaginal discharge. Again, I mean, like, descriptions of how rancid it is. And then there's just general poor hygiene and sounding, non-consensual sounding. So, yeah, that's it. That's the first time in a while that I've had to use some of these categories in this content sample. I don't know whether to be happy or sad. So let's jump into a review, shall we? Let's start off simple, easy. There's a couple typos in the book. Not a lot. There's a couple that I noticed. Not really a big deal. Just putting that out there. The prose, mostly fine. There's a couple of scenes where, for example, someone says something like, I was about to go full Karen on her. Sure, that's a viable sentence. Wouldn't have been my first pick, but we'll go with it. It's written pretty well overall. The torture in the book is written in a way where it had an emotional effect on me, in that it exhausted me. Flipping through page after page after page of emotional and physical torture has an effect. This book is the epitome of gross out for the sake of gross out. For example, there's a cannibalism scene. The torturess, cuts off a piece of the man, not a piece that you're thinking, just a random flap of skin, and then puts it in her mouth and eats it. And then we get a sentence describing that she's doing that. No reason, no description as to why. Doesn't even seem like it's a power play or something. She just does it. Yeah, that pretty much sums up that, I think. Plot is shallow, as simple as it can get. I already said that. There's a guy, he's gross, and he gets tortured to death because he wronged someone. And that's the entire plot. We get some backstory about his life. We get some backstory about the torturess's wife life. But mostly it is shallow and simple. Nothing necessarily wrong with that if that's what you're looking for, but that's what it is. I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's a beautiful novel with hidden meanings about the power of sex and victims and sexual assault and claiming your life back. None of that. No. There's a guy. He's gross, physically and mentally, and he does something that wrongs someone, and then he gets tortured to death. There's no nuance. It is just a book that jumps from one awful description of one awful thing, to another awful description of an awful thing. And that's the entire book. So, with that out of the way, we're going to get into our ratings. If you are unfamiliar with how this works, I have a set of aspects of a book that you could rate, so things like dialogue, plot, that kind of thing, and I rate them. This first set of numbers is rated on a scale from 0 to 10, 5 being completely unassuming, mediocre, nothing wrong with it. For the plot and plot direction of this book, I'm going to give it a 3. It's a 3. It is simple, it is shallow. Again, if that is what you're looking for, there's nothing wrong with that. But it is not anything special, even remotely. There's a guy, he is gross, and he gets tortured to death. And that's the plot. Really, no nuance there. At all. Outcome is the same no matter if he had told his story or not. The tone is a 7. It was gross. There was a gross man who did gross things, and gross things happened to him because of it. And it was gross. And it was exhausting. And it was brutal. And it had an emotional effect on me, which I think was the intention. So the tone gets a 7. Characters and character development, gonna be a 6. We spend most of the book developing the characters. The characters tell their backstories. Albeit their backstories are just jumping from one awful thing to another, we are still getting the character development. And by the end, you do have a pretty good picture of how these characters are and how they interact in their world. So it's a 6. Grammar and typos is just going to be a 4, just because I noticed a couple of typos and you really can't get above a 5. So it's a 4. Dialogue's going to be a 5. Nothing cringe. Nothing over the top, out of place. Felt like, for the most part, 2 people talking. So, 5. Prose, also a 5. Nothing wrong with it. Again, except for 1 or 2 lines like the one that I read to you. Completely normal. Which there's nothing wrong with. Personal enjoyment, it's a 6. I enjoyed it. Didn't enjoy it a lot, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was a change of pace from The Lost and Darkness on the Edge of Town and the Uterobossus books. Four very different types of books. Almost the entire spectrum of extreme horror, actually, now that I think about it. So it was a nice change of pace. I always like that over-the-top gross shit, for the most part. But there was nothing goofy about this one. This is not your genital grinder, where it's goofy and weird and, like, avant-garde. I hate to refer to it as that, but that's kind of the only way to describe that. It's, like, artsy disturbing. Like, yeah, let's have this guy fuck a bladder. Disturbing. This is not that. There's a guy. He's gross in a very realistic way. He does gross things in a very realistic way. And he gets tortured to death in a not so realistic way, but it's still very brutal. These next two ratings are on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being completely normal and unassuming, 10 being the worst of the worst. These are your disturbing and gross out factors. For the disturbing factor, it's a 7. It's pretty disturbing. Again, I can't stress this enough. There's a gross guy, and he gets tortured to death. It's pretty disturbing. The way that the author goes about the torture scenes, pretty disturbing. They're fast, they are punchy, and they are shocking. The gross out factor is a 9. There's a gross guy. He's covered in gross sores. He's leaking gross fluids. He does gross things with his cock. He does gross things with other people's cocks and pussies. And then horrifically gross things happen to him. So, it's really, really gross. The only thing that I have read that is grosser than this is Zola. Hog is almost on par. Cows is lagging behind. Hog is like an upper 8. Zola's a 10. This is a 9. It is very gross. It didn't have me retching or anything. It didn't have me doing any double takes. But it is disgusting, which I believe was intended. So, points to the author. I really haven't said anything that's not points to the author, actually. We'll get to that, but that's your ratings. We're going to jump into a plot summary now. You're welcome to leave, either if you are not prepared for this, or if you would like to read the book and don't want it spoiled. Heavy spoiler warning, I'm going to tell you a lot of the main plot points. I'm going to leave out 99% of the backstories of the characters, because it's really not important to the version of the story that I am telling you. As always, as I just said, I leave things out, and I also rearrange certain details so that it's easier for me to explain. So if you were to go and unfortunately pick up a copy of this book and read it, you would have a very different experience. But your emotional result at the end would probably be very similar. We're going to jump into it. Our main character, Joey, is what is known as a bug chaser. He purposefully tries to contract STIs, and his main goal is dying from AIDS. Usually, bug chasers chase AIDS. That's the big one. That's the goal. Joey looks like a zombie. His face is covered in warts and herpes. His nose is rotted from syphilis. He is definitively dying. While sleeping under a bridge, he gets beaten and kidnapped by an ex-prostitute named Tina. She explains that he infected her with more STIs than she can count. She forces him to tell her his story and explain why he ended up like he did. Joey recounts how he was molested in a men's restroom as a child and contracted herpes from it. As a teenager, he became infatuated with STIs and created a glory hole in a local restroom waiting around for dicks to suck. He became a bug collector, not just a chaser. He led a sexually deviant and aggressive life, being assaulted by many sexual partners. He was raped violently at least once. He infected Tina when he still had the money to afford higher-class whores. He would wait until his usual girls were done for the day, then he would suck the cum out of them or fuck them while they were still filled with cum. In between explaining different parts of his story, Tina slices his lower lip off with a straight razor and eats it. She pops one of his testicles with a stiletto, cuts off one of his eyelids, takes a blowtorch to his cock, and systematically cuts and pulls off one of his pectoral muscles. Now that's the unrealistic part, because he says he can see his heart beating through his ribcage. You'd be dead. No blood loss, probably before you could count to 3. But, I'm not a doctor. Tina then explains how a man who she loved got her out of the life she was living under her pimp. They were planning to marry when they found out that she had given him AIDS and that he was dying of cancer. She blames Joey for his death, and then shoves a metal pipe into Joey's ass, a metal straw into his cock, and pours molten metal into both, killing him. We get a nice in detail description of what it feels like to have an unlubed metal pipe shoved into your rectum, and what it's like to vomit up your own liquefied organs. Tina, walking out of the crime scene, which is burning behind her to do away with the evidence, decides that she will use her STIs for good, vowing to fuck rapists and adulterers. There's a bit of a gap there, and other deplorable men. If I have to explain to you why transmitting 12-ish different sexually transmitted infections to rapists and adulterers is a bad idea, you're probably too young to be watching this video. That can be explained away as her being syphilitic and out of her mind. So, there you go. That's the book. Let's talk about Tina for a couple of seconds, huh? I got a couple of questions, and these are plot holes, all right? These are tried and true, by the book plot holes. How the fuck did she find Joey? How did she find him? How the fuck did she know where to look? Okay, granted, wouldn't be very hard to find a guy that looks like a fucking zombie, but he did very well to hide himself. So even if she knew that that was who, and we'll get into this in a second, even if she knew that that was who she was supposed to be looking for and what he looked like, even though she kind of implies she doesn't, how the fuck did she find him? Let's get into this a little more. How, and this came up for me almost immediately, how the fuck did she know that he was the person who gave her the diseases? I thought this would be explained. It wasn't. She was having lots of unprotected sex with lots of people. Neither Joey nor her entertained for even a second that someone else could have given her the diseases. I'm not even entirely convinced that Joey's the one that gave her, like, all of the diseases. Like, she describes in detail how he would call her up and then come and lick cum out of her pussy. Come from many, many different men. So I'm as a reader not even totally convinced that Joey's the one that gave her all of these diseases. But they both are. She, again, also, when she's describing how her to-be husband died, she clearly did not have herself tested after the last time she fucked Joey, because neither she nor her boyfriend knew why he was getting sick, and they only found out that she and him had AIDS after he started dying of cancer, of a cancer related to AIDS. It's just, that's like a huge oversight, it kind of seems like. And then, how does she know that this guy is the same Joey who she thinks gave her the diseases? He looks nothing like his old self, the old self that would call her up to come and fuck her. She even comments on how she was planning to keep him as a sex slave, but when she found out how ugly he was, she decided against it, which implies that she somehow found a connection between the old him and the new him, even though since he's been fucking people like Tina, he's been kind of off the grid. So, how did she find him? How did she even know that this Joey and the Joey she was fucking were the same, considering how different they look? And how are both of them so sure that he's the one that gave her the diseases? She would have to have been stalking him from the moment that she somehow figured out that he gave her the diseases. Because it doesn't seem like he's a social butterfly. It seems like he goes from alley to alley fucking homeless women. So it's not like she goes up to a fucking vendor and is like, oh, I'm looking for this guy. Have you seen him? Oh, yeah, I saw that guy. Nose rotted off from syphilis a month ago. Like, he's over there under the bridge. Like, no, there's no way. So, I'm harping on this. There were more nitpicky things that I could have talked about, but I decided against because it doesn't really fucking matter. But this one, the plot is so shallow already, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, if that's what you're going for. But you couldn't have, thought this part through a little more? don't know. That's just me. And then on top of that, it's implied maybe to be like a year of time between when she and her to-be husband get together and when he dies. So he hit the absolute fucking lottery of AIDS. That's a really weird sentence. Like, AIDS usually takes a while. HIV usually takes a while to turn to AIDS, as far as I know. So for him to die in like less than a year after infection, like it's just a lot of factors, like that, and then she somehow managed to track Joey and somehow managed to, well, she first somehow managed to figure out that this fucking sad sack of pus was the same guy. It was the same guy as this Joey, but that's after she figured out that Joey was somehow. She somehow figured out that Joey was the one who gave her all of these diseases, even though, again, as a reader, I'm not even convinced of that because that's so fucking unrealistic. And I was able to look around the fucking pectoral muscle being torn off and the guy living through it. Like, that's it. I have nothing more to say. Book was fine overall. As I said, I enjoyed it. If you like these videos, like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that notification bell. I read a book every week and upload one of these videos every Friday. At least I try to. So if you're interested, stick around. As always, I will leave a link to this book in the description to where you can buy it. Please go buy it, go read it, go form your own opinions. That's really all I can say. My opinions are my opinions and my opinions alone. Yeah. That's it. See ya.